It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. A ceasefire breakthrough. Ukraine agrees to a 30-day pause in the war with Russia as the United States resumes military aid and intelligence sharing with Kyiv.
Hopefully President Putin will agree to that also, and we can get this show on the road.
Is Zelenskyy invited back to the White House?
Sure.
But with hope for the end of one war, confusion over Donald Trump's trade war with Canada as he reverses plans for another increase on tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium. The captain of one of the ships that collided in the North Sea is arrested, but both vessels are now expected to stay afloat. A jealous man soaked in self-pity, a judge's verdict on Kyle Clifford as he's told he'll die in prison for murdering 3 women in Hertfordshire. Also tonight, polls close in Greenland's elections as the world's biggest island contemplates the threat of a Trump takeover. Manchester United reveals a plan to build the biggest stadium in the UK, but with questions about the club's finances is the Red Devil in the detail. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. The last time senior US officials met their Ukrainian counterparts, it ended with Volodymyr Zelenskyy all but ejected from the White House after an extraordinary row in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. Today, the Saudi city of Jeddah was the scene of a major breakthrough in Mr. Trump's attempts to force a speedy end to Kyiv's war with Russia, with negotiating teams from the US and Ukraine reaching a framework agreement. Well, today's talks ended in a US proposal for a 30-day ceasefire on all fronts if agreed to by Russia. There was also the announcement that the US will immediately lift the pause on intelligence sharing and resume military aid to Ukraine after President Trump controversially pulled American support. The ball is now in Russia's court, with President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, set to visit Moscow and possibly meet President Putin this week. Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi was at the talks in Jeddah and sent this report.
There is much at stake, and as the American and Ukrainian delegations walked into the conference room side by side, the mood was clearly focused. Around this table, they were hoping to make history by formulating a plan to end the war Russia started in Ukraine.
Secretary Rubio, Sky News. Do you think you'll get a ceasefire?
No answer to that question before we were ushered out and the negotiations began. And after hours of talks, the US team finally emerged after sundown to announce an agreement on a proposed immediate 30-day ceasefire.
Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable.
The Ukrainian delegation today made something very clear, that they share President Trump's vision for peace. They share his determination to end the fighting, to end the killing.
The Ukrainian team described the talks as constructive, with President Zelenskyy later saying on social media, the American side understands our arguments. But as the delegates left the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where they'd been hosted by the Saudi government, they knew there were still plenty of issues that needed to be resolved, and they also need Russia to agree. Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is expected to fly to Moscow later this week. It's reported he'll meet Russia's president, Vladimir Putin. Here in Jeddah, the Ukrainians wanted to mend relations after that now infamous diplomatic spat in the Oval Office and see the restoration of military aid and intelligence sharing. For the Americans, they wanted to see that the Ukrainians were prepared and willing to make tough decisions to bring about peace. And on both those counts, the talks appear to have been a diplomatic success. It was lost on no one, though, that the talks took place as Russia and Ukraine continued to trade blows using the language of violence. Ukraine launching a massive drone attack in the early hours on the Moscow region. And despite more than 3 years of fighting, the Kremlin has signalled its war objectives remain the same. No concessions. But officials say they are waiting to hear from the US the details of the discussions. The Russians, too, have been launching new attacks. This was the port city of Odessa, once again in flames. The Trump administration may want to put out the fires of this war quickly, but reaching an agreement will take time. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jeddah.
Well, in a moment, we'll hear Donald Trump's response to that breakthrough with our US correspondent, Mark Stone. First, though, let's head to Alex Rossi in Jeddah. And Alex, this very much felt like stage one, with all eyes now on Moscow.
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake, Anna, this is just the beginning of what could be a very long process, despite the Trump administration saying they want to see quick results. This is just really a prelude to further talks, the start of a negotiating process. But the fact that they have got some movement when there had been none is in itself significant. It's a huge opportunity. But of course, the big question now is, will Moscow, will the Russians sign up to that? And there have been conflicting indications coming out of the Kremlin. On the one hand, no concessions at all. They've got the momentum on the battlefield. Why should they negotiate or agree to anything? Vladimir Putin has made clear that as far as the special military operation is concerned, as they refer to the war, the war objectives that they've always had, they remain the same. But we're also hearing from officials that they are actually waiting to hear what was said at these talks. So there is perhaps an opening there. We will know more. Steve Witkoff, the US envoy for Donald Trump, he is heading to Moscow later in the week, possibly as early as tomorrow, and it's possible that he may sit down and talk with Vladimir Putin. But of course, until they agree to something, until they agree to this ceasefire, the war rages on.
Alex Leifris there in Jeddah, thank you. Well, let's go to Mark Stone then at the White House. And Mark, we have had reaction from Donald Trump this evening in the midst of a pretty extraordinary public outing with Elon Musk.
Yeah, another extraordinary day here at the White House on the South Lawn. Late last night, overnight, Donald Trump said he would be buying a Tesla first thing this morning in order to support his pal Elon Musk, whose company Tesla has been tanking a bit of late. And true to form, he didn't just buy one, but he looked at 4 different models which were pulled up on the South Lawn of the White House. You know, conflicts of interest, well, maybe, given that he seemed to be giving all his attention to one car manufacturer. Other electric cars are available in the United States. He did not mention that. But beyond that spectacle, of course, the focus was the apparent breakthrough in Jeddah, and he was asked about that. He confirmed that he thinks that, well, first of all, that he will talk to Vladimir Putin perhaps as soon as this week. As Alex was saying, Steve Witkoff is going to go to Moscow. That is all important. Witkoff was there last month to secure the release of an American prisoner held by Russia. That meeting last month seemed to be absolutely pivotal in bringing both the Americans and the Russians together, having some sort of an understanding. We don't know what was said at that meeting, but clearly the Americans believe the Russians will now play ball and the ball is in their court. You could argue the ball's always been in their court, given that they are the aggressor. But he seems to be suggesting, Trump seems to be suggesting some significant movement now. Have a listen.
Hopefully President Putin will agree to that also, and we can get this show on the road. We can get this horrible war where 2,000-3,000 soldiers a week, every week, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 sometimes. I get the reports. And they're not American soldiers. They're Ukrainian and they're Russian. Ukraine has agreed to it, and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal. But I think the ceasefire is very important. If we can get Russia to do it, that'll be great. If we can't, we just keep going on and people are going to get killed, lots of people.
Is Zelenskyy invited back to the White House?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, Mark, stay there. As you said, a very busy day again at the White House. So let's stay with Mr. Trump. And as he seeks to end one war, earlier today he looks set to escalate another, a trade war with Canada, saying he would double tariffs on its aluminium and steel to 50%. In the past hour, though, that was scrapped. But punitive tariffs are still set to come into effect tomorrow. Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner is in Victoria, in British Columbia, in Canada. Huge relief, no doubt, that the 50% tariffs on steel are abandoned, Martha. But it took the Ontario Premier to back down, stock markets to fall to get there.
Yeah, relief, Anna, but I think among the Canadians I've been speaking to, a real sense of whiplash too, because there's a true on-off, tit-for-tat nature to these tariffs. They woke up this morning to this news that Donald Trump was threatening to impose this 50% tariff on Canadian aluminium and steel going across the border. That's now been revised down to 25% for now, although who knows what will happen next. Yesterday, similarly, the Ontario Premier, Doug Ford, he was threatening to impose a 25% surcharge on electricity being sold over the border to the US states of New York, Michigan and Minnesota. That's now also been put on pause, pending a meeting that he has with a senior Trump economic advisor. So a real sense of chaos over these tariffs. But one thing that is constant is a feeling of anger, upset and betrayal in the Canadians that I've been speaking to today. Certainly, I've just come from a coffee shop round the corner where the owner is selling Canadiano coffees. He says they're much stronger than the Americano alternative. So light-hearted, but there are these quiet acts of defiance going on among individuals and businesses. In many of the alcohol shops here, people are turning round the bottles of alcohol which are manufactured in the United States, so they're no longer on public display. A real deterioration in relations between the two countries.
Martha, with the mood there in Canada, thank you. Well, let's bring Mark Stone back in then with news about what those tariffs mean more broadly, including for the UK, Mark.
Yes, because behind all the noise of 25% for Canada to going up to 50%, which now appears, for now at least, to have gone away, is the news that come midnight, 25% tariffs will be imposed on all steel and aluminium products from anywhere in the world, including, of course, the UK, and there will be no exemptions. We know that the European Union has said it will reciprocate when this happens. The UK is taking a slightly different stance. Jonathan Reynolds, the UK Trade Secretary, was speaking to Howard Lutnick, his counterpart here on Sunday, trying to find some sort of a last-minute exemption. We know that Keir Starmer and Donald Trump spoke yesterday. They would have talked about Ukraine, but also about tariffs as well. But I caught up a little while ago with Peter Navarro, who is Donald Trump's senior trade envoy, trade advisor. He was very clear, no exemptions. And I asked him, too, about all this flip-flopping and what it's doing to the markets.
Very good reason why no exemptions, no exclusions exist as a policy. It's because when we were kind enough as a country to make those kind of gestures to our friends, they bit the hand that fed them, and that's not going to happen again.
But he does seem to be changing his mind all the time.
Not that crap.
But is that part of it?
Sir, where are you from?
From Sky News, UK.
Yeah.
May I ask you?
Yeah, Mr. Navarro. But why is that? Why is that? It's a fact that he's changing his mind every single day.
It's a negotiation, my friend.
Right. So he doesn't mean it. So it's all part of a negotiation. And it's causing havoc to the stock markets.
It's not causing havoc.
Well, it is. They are tumbling.
Okay, Mr. Navarro.
I'll take other questions.
So there we are, a flavour of the mood here on the North Lawn of the White House this afternoon. Tomorrow, Anna, another day, who knows where we will be.
Absolutely, Mark. We'll keep an eye on the latest from the Trump White House, of course, for the moment. Thank you. Let's move on to another of our top stories. And the captain of the cargo ship, which collided with a tanker in the North Sea yesterday, has been arrested. It comes after the search for a missing crew member of the ship, the Ceylon, was called off. Well, here's what we know then. The Stena Immaculate and the Ceylon collided in the North Sea off the coast of East Yorkshire on Monday morning, forcing crew members to abandon ship. Both vessels burst into flames after the crash, about 13 miles from the coast. Aerial footage has revealed the extent of the damage to the oil tanker. These images show the stricken Stena Immaculate as water pours out of its sides. Although both vessels became attached to each other during the collision, the Ceylon broke free of the Stena Immaculate late last night and began drifting away from the collision zone. It is now being towed away from the shore and authorities are planning salvage operations. Let's get the latest. Here's our national correspondent, Tom Parmenter.
The smouldering wreck of the cargo ship is now in desperate trouble. The Ceylon had been drifting, then tugboats appear to have been moving it away from the coast. Initially, it was feared it may sink, but experts believe it can be towed to safety. One of the crew was lost at sea after the collision. Its containers that had recently held sodium cyanide were empty at the time of the crash. It's now become a criminal investigation. The ship's master, a 59-year-old man, is being questioned by Humberside police on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. With shipping still restricted from ports in the Humber, we went up and flew over the other vessel involved. The Stena Immaculate tanker is also in danger. It's not safe to board. Salvage experts need a full assessment, including how hot parts of the tanker are after the blaze. It had been carrying 220,000 barrels of jet fuel for the US Navy. It was held in 16 cargo tanks. At least one of them was ruptured in the crash.
This tanker is 183 metres long, and that central section has just been caved in. The fire damage that we can see is very severe, and we can't see what has happened under the waterline. What is clear is that this vessel is going to be very difficult to recover.
Everyone who escaped these burning vessels after the collision was taken ashore, apart from one crewman who was lost in the chaos.
Search and rescue operations for the missing sailor continued throughout yesterday, but were called off yesterday evening at the point of which the chances of their survival had unfortunately significantly diminished. Our working assumption is that, very sadly, that the sailor is deceased.
Of the surviving crew members, one told us he was just grateful to be alive. Pollution control measures are all now on standby to protect the marine environment and the nature along this coastline.
There will be a marine response centre set up, probably in Grimsby, I would imagine. But they will be in touch with the salvage organisations, the oil spill response contractors, also be in touch with owners of the ships or the managers of the ships to find out what they can do. So it's a multi-agency contingency.
But the priority is to make these vessels safe. They're registered in Madeira, Portugal and the United States. So it's an international maritime investigation, but also now a criminal investigation to establish what went so catastrophically wrong. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
Well, as the fate of the vessels and their contents continues to be uncertain, environmental agencies and charities are carefully monitoring the potential harm to marine wildlife across the East Coast. Here's our science correspondent, Thomas Moore.
On Bempton Cliffs in Yorkshire, seabirds are gathering for the nesting season. 500,000 breed here, and many are already feeding offshore, an area now potentially polluted by oil and chemicals spilled by the tanker and cargo ship. Seals, porpoises and whales are also at risk, and rangers are carefully monitoring wildlife.
Oil pollution, especially for guillemots and razorbills and puffins who swim through the water and then sit on the sea, can be really awfully affected by oil pollution.
Well, what does it do to them?
Basically, it coats their feathers, and often it's not a quick kind of death for them. They're actually, when they preen and then ingest the oil, is that when the problem comes.
Jet fuel leaking from the tanker would evaporate from the sea surface reasonably quickly, so environmental impact would be localised. But a slick of heavy fuel oil used to power the ships would be damaging, particularly if the tar-like substance came ashore. And maritime safety agencies are carefully going through the inventory of all the containers on the cargo ship to check whether anything else could pose a risk.
There is a strong wind coming from the north, which will push any pollution that's in the water further south along the east coast. But whether that will disperse before it comes ashore is unknown. And all the way along this shore, there are wildlife groups on standby, just in case wildlife is contaminated.
Bridlington is Europe's largest lobster landing port. The boats were kept in harbour while the exclusion zone around the collision site was in force. Sky News can reveal that trawlers and lifeboats that helped in the search and rescue close to the burning ships were ordered to be lifted out of the water and cleaned as a precaution.
We're actually going to be issuing the fishermen with water bottles or water tanks to actually go and carry out sampling over the next few months. So we already took samples yesterday. We had a fishing boat out there, took samples, and we're going to maintain a sampling programme to make sure that we are on top of the situation, and we know if anything's entered the water column that shouldn't have done.
The next 24 hours are crucial. A proper assessment is needed of what has leaked into the water and how much. Then any pollution contained to minimise impact on a vulnerable marine environment. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Bridlington.
The racing commentator John Hunt told the man who killed his wife and 2 daughters that hell will roll out the red carpet for him when he dies. Kyle Clifford attacked Mr Hunt's daughters, Louise and Hannah, with a crossbow and fatally stabbed their mother, Carol, in Bushey in Hertfordshire last July. Today, Clifford was told he would never leave prison. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt reports.
At 26, Kyle Clifford has a long life ahead of him. All of it will be spent in prison with no chance of parole. And here's why.
The evidence I have heard shows you to be a jealous man, soaked in self-pity, a man who holds women in utter contempt. This is no occasion to subject the family and friends of your victims to any delay or suspense. I therefore make clear at once that for each of these 3 murders, the sentence will be one of life imprisonment with a whole life order. That means a sentence from which you will never be released.
Clifford had been dumped by his girlfriend, Louise Hunt, a dog groomer. Angry at the rejection, he hatched a plan of revenge. 2 weeks later, his own dashcam recorded him arriving at her home. He had a butchery knife with him and a crossbow, murder weapons he bought on the internet. In an afternoon of bloodshed, he murdered Louise, her sister Hannah, and their mother Carol. In court, John Hunt said he'd lost 3/4 of his family to Clifford, a psychopath who'd deceived them all. In an impact statement he read out, he said, "Just remember one thing, whatever misery lies ahead for you, on your dying day, there will be no release for you. The screams of hell, I can hear them now when they roll the red carpet out for you. Your miserable fate will last for eternity." Mr Hunt praised the courage of his daughter Hannah, who even as she lay dying managed to call police to the house. He believes that Clifford had planned to wait there for his return and kill him too. His surviving daughter Amy said, "You ensured that my family endured their last moments alone and terrified. I always hoped that I'd be there to hold my mum's hand as she passed away. I only wish it had been me instead of them." Clifford, a former soldier, fled the murder scene with the crossbow under a blanket. He was caught and arrested the next day as he tried to kill himself. He refused to go to court to hear his sentence.
Today's sentence sends a message to men who perpetrate serious acts of violence against women. You will be held accountable and you will face the full force of the law. You can run, but you cannot hide from justice.
The Hunt family and the judge said they hoped everything that had been said about Clifford would eventually be relayed to him in his prison cell. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Cambridge Crown Court.
In the past half hour, polls have closed in Greenland at a time when US President Donald Trump has his eyes set on the Danish territory. The country itself is enormous, 10 times the size of the UK, and has huge untapped resources. With growing calls for independence, today's vote has received unprecedented attention from the international community. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Wackhorn, reports now from Nuuk in Greenland.
It is a place of huge potential, of natural wealth and beauty. But Greenland's only now just started to grab the world's attention. We all know why.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
So which one's your vote? But the US president's advances have not gone down well here among many. We join tour operators preparing for a tourist season like no other. They admit Donald Trump has been good for business.
It's free advertisement. So we are looking into a very busy season this year.
Donald Trump going out and talking about Greenland like it has never been mentioned before. It's on everybody's lips. Like everybody knows what Greenland is at the moment.
He's put you on the map.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a fact.
But the idea America could take over Greenland under President Trump only makes them angry.
I think that guy he's lunatic, he's mad. There's something wrong with his head.
Right up to the eve of Election Day, the US president has been continuing his meddling. Donald Trump's direct interference is making this a highly charged election. When Greenlanders go to the polls, they may end up returning the biggest vote yet in favour of independence from Denmark.
Trump wants to buy my country, Greenland.
Greenland's biggest social media influencer is running for office. Kupanak Olsen says Donald Trump's making it more likely Greenland goes its own way, not Denmark's or America's.
Because everyone in Greenland now have to have an opinion whether we should stay under Denmark or whether we should become a state under the United States or whether we should become independent. It's making us aware, hey, we are more worth than what the Danish people have been telling us the last 300 years. Maybe we can stand on our own feet.
With messages like this from the American president on the eve of the election, offering Greenland investment worth billions of dollars to make you rich, feelings are running high here.
What kind of message do you hope the election sends to Donald Trump?
I hope it sends a clear message to him that we are not for sale. We don't want to be Americans. No, we don't want to be Danes. We want to be Greenlanders, and we want our own independence in the future, and we want to build our own country by ourselves, not with his help.
There's no doubt Donald Trump's energised Greenland's politics. But how much they're shifting in his direction will only become clear when the voting is over. Dominic Waghorn in Nuuk, Greenland.
Now, Manchester United has unveiled plans to build the UK's biggest stadium. The 100,000-seat arena next to the site of its current Old Trafford ground will be the centrepiece of a regeneration scheme for the area. The stadium will cost around £2 billion, though the club says it could generate many more billions for the local economy. Here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
This is Manchester United's mammoth plan to build the country's biggest stadium, to fit 100,000 fans, transforming this entire area by knocking down Old Trafford and leaving behind 115 years of history, but leaving a dilapidated venue, neglected by the Glazers during 2 decades of ownership. But it's been a priority for Sir Jim Ratcliffe since gaining control by buying almost 30% of the club a year ago.
United is the world's favourite football club, and it deserves a stadium befitting of its stature. And I think a really good example is the Eiffel Tower. You go to Paris, you stay in a hotel, you spend money. We have 1 billion people around the world who follow Manchester United, and they will all want to visit this stadium.
But at the same time, United are saying the financial situation is so bad they're having to cut 40% of the club staff, with up to 450 redundancies. In December, apparently, the club was nearly going bust. Now, £2 billion is being spent on a stadium. How do those things marry up?
Well, the way it marries up is our short-term focus is to improve our finances. And then the long-term ambition is to have the best stadium in the world. We're in a transformation phase, and sometimes when you want to make radical changes, you have to take 2 steps back before you can move forward.
Planning for the future while struggling in the present. The team enduring their worst ever Premier League season. Funding this mega project could add to the financial pressures. These are ambitious plans, but costly ones. They're looking to build a stadium and redevelop the whole area, which is why United are searching for government cash. But they'll also need outside investment. Could that come from sovereign wealth funds? The club is already more than £700 million in debt. It seems the bigger and better stadium fans demanded, but they don't want to pay the price with higher ticket prices. The Supporters Trust concerned local fans would be priced out, harming the atmosphere. Can a stadium be built while rebuilding a squad? And do the numbers add up in an ambitious timeline? To build all this in 5 years. Rob Harris, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by The Observer's chief lead writer, Sonia Soda, and the broadcaster and commentator, Ali Miraj. And among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front of The Guardian with the headline, the US says the ball is in Russia's court as Ukraine agrees that 30-day ceasefire. That and lots more to talk about when we come back.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
No heads there. Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Observer's chief leader writer Sonia Soda and the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj, both with us from now until midnight. Welcome to both of you. Plenty to discuss, so let's see the front pages then, shall we? The Metro, first of all, leading on the sentencing of triple killer Kyle Clifford and quotes the victim's father, who told the murderer that hell will roll out the red carpet for him. The Daily Mirror also leads on John Hunt's victim impact statement to Kyle Clifford, who was given a whole life sentence for triple murder and rape. The FT, meanwhile, reporting on the proposed 30-day ceasefire, which Zelenskyy says he is ready to accept, though the ball is now in Russia's court, according to US officials. That potential ceasefire is also on the front of the Telegraph, which writes that Putin has been told to accept the deal. The Times also leading on Ukraine, reporting Kyiv is open to a ceasefire as Trump restarts aid and intelligence for Ukraine. And it is also the lead story for the front of The Guardian there. US says the ball is in Russia's court. The Daily Mail highlights the deal comes after a dramatic breakthrough in which Zelenskyy backed the US peace plan. It's also on the front page of The Eye, which adds the attention is now on Moscow. So let's get the latest then from Sonia. Ali, it felt like a big deal today, but with so many stages to go. Absolutely. And interestingly, the pressure's back on Moscow, partly because they've restored military aid and intelligence to Ukraine. It's part of the squeeze for Russia now.
Yes, that's right. And, this is news that has been welcomed by global leaders, including Keir Starmer. The fact that essentially Ukraine and the US have agreed a 30-day ceasefire, but that is subject to cooperation and agreement from Russia. And that is a very big if, I think. There's a lot of question marks over what Russia might agree to, but it's significant for Ukraine because those talks have been accompanied by a restarting of military support and intelligence support. So that is really huge. So it does feel like US-Ukraine relations, obviously they're nothing like what they were under the Biden administration, where it was extremely clear whose side the United States was on. But I think now we can look at, those awful scenes we saw in the White House. And Trump clearly thought he had some sort of strategy in kind of forcing Ukraine's hand and potentially, anyway, in getting them to agree to a ceasefire. But as you say, Anna, it is just agreement from Ukraine to a ceasefire in principle. We've got to get Russia to the table. Russia have got to agree. We've now got to hope that actually President Trump, he seems to have let President Putin get away with so much. There's been very little leverage applied to Putin. All the pressure has been on Ukraine, the country that was invaded against international law by Russia. So, what we might see from Putin, but there is going to be pressure on Putin, but what we might see from Putin is really key because unless Russia agree to halt fighting for 30 days and attacks for 30 days, it's a non-starter in the first place. And then even if you get to the point where you've got a ceasefire under pressure from the US, where do those talks end up? We know that going into these talks, there are people who are going to be in very different places, not just Russia and Ukraine, but there's been such an about turn in the American administration under President Trump that where these talks end up is, if they even happen, there's huge question marks.
But what it does do, if we take a look at the Times, they've all got quite similar headlines, to be fair, haven't they? Kyiv open to ceasefire as Trump restarts aid. It calls Moscow's bluff because so far Trump's been able to say to Ukraine, you don't want peace, you're not ready for peace. And this switches round and asks the same question of Moscow. And Zelenskyy has always been really concerned about the prospect of a ceasefire, which would allow Russia to rearm, restore, re-recruit, bolster its front lines. And that's been his great concern.
Well, I think the Times makes it very clear that Donald Trump has said it takes two to tango, and it does take two to tango. They have put a lot of pressure on Ukraine, as Sonia is saying. They also withheld intelligence sharing and military support in recent days, which is now being restored on the back of this. It's a 30-day ceasefire proposal. Ukraine's agreed. We're now going to see where Putin and Russia are. Frankly, this is just the first step in a much deeper negotiation, because Zelenskyy made it very clear in that very unfortunate press conference in the White House that security guarantees are absolutely fundamental for Ukraine. Now, we know that Europe's been trying to step up in recent days. Starmer's done his bit. Macron gets it, I think, and he's talking about providing a nuclear shield to Europe. So I do think Europe has got a galactic kick up the backside. It should have actually really taken on board 3 years ago, but it's finally come to its senses. But ultimately, NATO allies are saying that they can't do it without some security cover from the US, and that is key. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, is going to be meeting Trump, I think, in the next couple of days. We'll see what that brings. But yes, pressure now will be put on Russia. And indeed, the US is also talking about the possibility of ramping up sanctions. We know that Trump gets on well with Putin. We'll now wait and see what that means in reality. Marco Rubio has also said that they're ready to stop shooting and start talking. And now we're going to see how far this talking is going to get us.
Yes, and there's more talking to come. And you have to bear in mind that, the original chat was Russia, America, with Europe and Ukraine excluded.
Yes.
So in a sense, this is interesting.
Yep.
You've got the G7 foreign ministers. Well, we know Marco Rubio had to leave Saudi to get there, so we knew there was a cut-off for these talks. There's something called the E5 as well, a summit in Paris, which the Defence Secretary John Healey's been discussing. European allies will accelerate our work to help Ukraine secure a just and lasting peace. The NATO Secretary General later this week will also be at the White House. So there's stuff still happening, isn't there? Not least Steve Witkoff heading to Moscow with, one hopes a meeting with President Putin himself, but we'll see.
Yeah, but in the meantime, drone attacks keep happening too.
Yeah.
So they're attacking each other. There was an attack on Moscow. The Russians also have hit back. So people are dying in the meantime. Look, Trump, whatever his motivations are, he has actually changed the game here, because we are talking about a 30-day ceasefire. Now, we'll see what Putin does and whether the Russians play ball with this. But until this point, we weren't even here.
Yeah, exactly. And, he's a man of peace. We kept hearing as well, didn't we, from the Trump team that were there. Trump is driving this. It's still all about trying to portray it as if this is Trump's
It's very
great
much,
work.
it's brand Trump, isn't it?
Yeah.
He likes to, talk about the art of the deal, himself as a deal maker, bringing people to the table. I mean, the truth is, I think, he's a bully, and he bullies people. And, he's acted as no other, world leader, no other leader of the US has done in kind of living memory, and he's bullied Ukraine to the table. Essentially there's been a change in strategy, and that's been very clear after that press conference that you saw with, Zelenskyy and JD Vance and President Trump that went so hideously wrong. It really did feel like Zelenskyy was being goaded into sort of, lashing back. But I think there's been a lot of work behind the scenes with Ukraine, with its European allies, to think about, well, how do we get this back on track? And, they've clearly decided, and I think it's the right decision, that, you've sort of got to play Trump's game, and that's what's happening. Yeah. Where it ends up, though, I think is a big question. And I think, the real test will be if the US sets up these talks, if Putin comes to the table and then the US sides with Putin in terms of a resolution to this conflict. And there aren't security guarantees. And in fact, there's nothing, things get frozen where they are, i.e. with the Russian army having to...
of Ukrainian
exactly.
Land, frankly, yeah.
And then there are no security guarantees that Putin wouldn't do the same with Ukraine in the future. Or indeed, the Baltic states, for example.
Who's asking Russia what their concessions are?
Exactly.
David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, as well, on X, or Twitter, as we used to call it. We welcome the breakthrough ceasefire proposal agreed today by the US in Ukraine. The ball is now firmly in Russia's court. Looking forward to working with G7 partners this week to drive progress towards a just and lasting peace for Ukraine, which is, ironically, in Canada. Which takes us to tariffs. Let's take a look at the front of the Daily Telegraph. Their lead story, Putin told to agree Ukraine ceasefire. The picture is of President Trump buying into Tesla, or buying a Tesla as well. That was the suggestion. By check, he told us to. And the point of this is that, as we read below this story, global stock markets have been in a meltdown as the Trump tariff war takes hold. But Tesla stocks have been in a meltdown too, haven't they? So weave that all in for us if you both can.
Well, they have. Tesla's has been taking a hit, and indeed Europeans are also shying away from Teslas. I wonder why. If you've got a guy jumping up and down who can barely fit into his T-shirts in the Oval Office, being very rude about people on X, I did actually recommend on my show that Elon Musk should go and procure a tailor for himself. They're standing in front of this monstrosity of a Tesla. So, yes, it is affecting his share price, and rightly so, some would say. Not that I'm being partisan about it.
Just a small bit. I mean, it's Germany, apparently, there's been a real drop-off.
Well, there has, but
outwardly supported.
People can vote with their feet. People can vote with their feet. It's affecting stock markets as well. Stock markets are in meltdown, apparently, about this. 1.5%, the S&P 500 is down, the FTSE's down too. Inflationary pressures there, and even talks of recession, although I hope we don't get there. So markets are a bit spooked by this on-off trade war stuff.
Well, the Financial Times, I'm not sure we can show it, but anyway, Trump ratchets up Canada trade war with 50% aluminium and steel tariffs. That was the message at the start of the day. By the end of the day, we know the Ontario Premier, there we go, it's that middle story. The Ontario Premier had backed down. They ship electricity to some key states and cities in America. They were going to put tariffs on that. He's backed down. That's gone away. It's still 25%, 25%, and we've got retaliatory tariffs as well. So this is, it's still really critical, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and we sort of feels like we've walked back from the brink on tariffs, but who knows where we'll end up in just 24 hours. And really, the background to all this is Mark Carney has been elected by his party as the new Prime Minister of Canada. He's taken quite a tough line in contrast to the Conservatives in Canada on what Trump's been saying about Canada, the fact that they might want to be the 51st state. And he said, look, we will hit back. And he's got a lot more leverage, it is true, than Europe, because Canada supplies with the US with a lot of electricity, with raw goods like uranium, for example. So Canada does have leverage, and that's what we've seen from Ontario. In terms of pushing up the cost of electricity for American cities. So what you're seeing is Canada say, Ontario, the Canadian province, do this, and then it's all been walked back, but I think we're going to see more tit for tat in the future.
And walked back to 25%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
still
exactly.
Major.
Absolutely.
Still major.
Lots more still to come. More domestic stuff as well. This is on the front page of The Guardian. Let's take a look at that. Discussing the government's plan to reform the state and cutting thousands of civil service jobs.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Exclusively on Peacock. 2 teams, 1 city, everything on the line.
Gloves off, let them rip into each other again.
Arsenal.
Oh, that's a brilliant strike!
Victory can keep their title hopes alive.
Arsenal fired!
But Chelsea need all 3 points in their own chase for top 4.
Who else?
This is the Premier League. Streaming on Peacock.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again. Ali Miroj and Sonia Soda, welcome back to both of you. Now, Guardian, Ali, this is Doge, Elon Musk style, UK style. Tell us more.
They want to cut civil servants. This is a Labour government that wanting to cut civil servants. The Tories tried it, failed. I spoke to Francis Maud the other day. He was looking at all of this when the Tories were in government, said it was notoriously difficult because the Treasury controls the purse strings and the departments don't talk to the Treasury. Very difficult to do. They want to start by cutting 10,000 jobs in their civil service, performance-related pay. Who would have thought? They also want to cut jobs in the NHS. I might don a red rosette and say, Comrade Miraj,
what jobs in the NHS then?
Well, they want to basically look at jobs that they think are superfluous in the NHS, which are not increasing productivity. This is coming from a Labour government, and this is before they cut the welfare bill.
I think it's a sign of where we are fiscally, actually. So we're now in this position where, I mean, there wasn't really any money anyway. Rachel Reeves had to put tax up, national insurance for employers. She's now got to increase spending on defence. She's cutting international aid to pay for it. There is no money, which is why I think, to be honest, this sounds slightly desperate to me. They're calling it, you know, there's a Labour think tank that dubbed it Project Chainsaw after Elon Musk.
Elon was on stage,
yeah, exactly. But they are in a desperate situation when it comes to the fiscal situation.
Yeah, let's. Well, the front page of The Guardian has this stadium at Manchester United on the front page. So does the Financial Times. You know, lots of money on this one, 2 billion.
2 billion.
You know.
So Jim Ratcliffe, 100,000 potential. Apparently, he's saying it will rival the Eiffel Tower. It's going to be
quite the claim, isn't it?
Going to be collecting rainwater, solar powered, and apparently modular built, which means that apparently a lot of it can be built overseas and floated down the river, so it will take half the time to build.
Only 5 years.
And they're competing in the international
And apparently
market.
that canopy is sort of meant to resemble an umbrella, sort of in recognition of Manchester's rainy climate.
Seriously?
But that's what I read. That's what I read in the papers. So apparently it goes sort of over the outside of the city. So it's going to be the biggest covered structure in Europe, I think.
Yeah. Like
and it's going to keep people dry on the outside as well as the inside. I mean, it's like, it looks pretty impressive, doesn't it? And it's going to have its own Wembley Way style boulevard.
92,000
I've been
jobs.
sweating up on it.
You have. A quick mention of this North Sea crash disaster. One crew member missing, sadly presumed dead, and an arrest.
Terrible.
Yeah, an arrest now of the captain of the ship that crashed into the other stationary one. My understanding from hearing some of the reporting today was it hopefully might not be as bad in terms of environmental impact as we originally thought, because a lot of it still contained this jet fuel and some of the containers, but clearly very odd. And we need to find out exactly what happened. I mean, a stationary ship and with all the radar equipment you have nowadays and so on, very odd.
Yeah, I mean, still, the cargo vessel's still on fire today. I mean, some amazing pictures, and we'll definitely watch that one closely. Quick rattle, so much to talk about tonight. Thank you both very much indeed. Ali, Sonia, see you shortly. Thank you. Here is the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather. Sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the rest of the week looks rather cold and showery, with overnight frosts becoming more widespread by the weekend. Many places starting dry tomorrow, patchy frost. There will be a scattering of blustery showers. They'll become more widespread across the south and east of Britain through the morning, some of them wintry. The southeast of Ireland will see the odd shower too, but elsewhere it will stay mainly dry with bright or sunny spells. It'll be rather cold and windy, with a notable wind chill for exposed coastal areas. The afternoon will see showers taking over more of England and Wales, hail, sleet, hill snow possible. There'll be sunny spells, though, in between those showers. Eastern Scotland will keep the risk of wintry showers too. Most other places, though, will stay fine and dry into the evening.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Well, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. Have the Saudi talks opened the way for a peace deal in Ukraine? We'll have more on that and the latest on Trump, tariffs and Tesla too after the break.